Now I will show you how to make an egg warmer like this. And here you have several examples in different colors. And this is a perfect project to get rid of leftover yarn. And these egg chickens, they are ribbed, so they are elastic and will easily fit over a big egg. So to make them you need some leftover yarn and 5 knitting needles. I will cast on 36 stitches evenly distributed onto 4 of these. Here I have my first stitch that I made by doing a slip knot. When I cast on, I want this to be elastic, so I do it like this. I use my index finger and I go from down and up, twist it around my index finger. I take the knitting needle on top of the yarn, I move down to the tip of my finger, up through the loop, and I slip it onto the knitting needle. And again, from down and up, twist to make the loop, knitting needle on top, move down to the tip of my finger, up through the loop, and slip it onto the needle. And then, I said 36 stitches, that is 9 on each of my 4 needles. 9. And when I move to the next one, I place it underneath and hold it like this. And I just keep going, making sure the first stitch is placed close to the last one. So I will continue in this manner until I have cast on all my 4 needles. Now I'm done casting on, and I keep the one I cast on first with the yarn end here in my left hand. And here is the last needle I cast on, and my working yarn I usually keep over 2 fingers like this. Lots of ways of doing this, so just do what you prefer. And now I will begin to knit ribbing. I do that by first, when I knit the knit stitch, I will do I knit 1 purl 1, knit 1 purl 1 this time. So when I knit, I stick my knitting needle through the first stitch this way. I move to the tip of my index finger underneath the yarn to pick it up, bring it through the stitch and off the needle and onto this one. When I purl, I begin at the tip of my index finger, I move behind the yarn and up through the yarn, back underneath the yarn and towards the tip of my finger. Then I bring the yarn through the stitch this way and I slip it off the needle. So I knit and I purl. So I will keep doing this for 5 or 6 rows, or for approximately 1.5 centimeters. And only thing you have to make sure is that you do not pull too much on this right needle, because then you'll create this gap, which does not look too pretty. But this can easily be mended by really by not pulling that needle. But you can prevent it by not pulling that needle. You can fix it by, when you knit the next stitches, you knit them a little bit loose and you do not pull. Just make sure it comes close to the last stitch, but without pulling too much, so that you stitch by stitch decrease the gap a little bit. And after 4 or 5 stitches, it's almost completely gone. Like this. So that's the disadvantage by using this technique to cast on. It's a bit unstable when you knit the first row, but when you see the result, my personal opinion is that it's really worth it, because as you can see, one, really stretchy, and you have no big ridge around here. You can see it's just what you knit, really. It's not this big edge here. So I'll knit ribbing to make this belt here, and I will change color. This is voluntary, of course. You can make the whole thing in one color or stripes or whatever, just be creative. But I will knit this belt here. I will change colors. I will knit one more row to get started on the new color, and I'll get back to you when I will begin to increase to make the tail. Now I'm finished doing the first piece here, and I have begun on my second color. The reason why I do this is just because I've only knitted one row with this new color, so that will mean I have loose yarn ends, and I want to be able to have some tension on my yarn without pulling the yarn through. So I will now begin to increase for the tail. Then I will knit the first stitch, and I will pick up the yarn between these two stitches. I place it like this onto my left needle. I stick my right needle through the opposite way, and I make them change places, and then I knit. The reason why I do this is to avoid creating a big hole. If I just knitted without twisting the stitch, I'd make a big hole here, and I don't want that. So, but now, if I just pull the yarn end slightly here, you can see that you cannot almost see that I have made another stitch. So that is the reason. And I will knit the entire row. I continue doing with my, I continue to knit the ribbing. There you go. And I do this throughout the whole row, and when I get to the end of the row, after the last stitch, I increase one more time the exact same way as I did before. And I will make in all 5 increases. Now pretty soon I will have finished my first. Then I will knit 2 rows of ribbing, then one more increase, knit 2 rows of ribbing. So 2 rows of ribbing, 1 row with increases, and repeat. Here I have my second increase, like this. So, and I will, and now this is the first stitch in my row, and I have 1 increase here and 1 increase there, and these 3 are all knitted, not purl stitches, knit stitches only. I will continue to knit these 3, and then I will knit and purl every other stitch for the rest of the row. And the next time I will increase, I knit the first stitch and I increase on the next. I will do that for every time I increase, so that in the end you'll have, you see this row that goes through the whole tail is the first stitch of the row, and then you can see that they angle out, the stitches angle out to each side, and those are my increases. So I increase on each side of the first stitch. So I will do my 5 increases. After the last increase I will knit 1 row and I will get back to you with the next step. So now I'm finished and the tail looks like this. Only knit stitches here and ribbing on the rest of the body. So I will now knit the tail taller in the back, and I do that by knitting first the tail there, and then I do the 4 first stitches of the ribbing. And now I will turn my work around and continue back to the beginning of my row. But if I just do that, I will be left with a big gap here. So to avoid that, I put my yarn in front of my right needle like this, and I slip this stitch onto my right needle. I bring the yarn in front here of the purl side, and I just put the stitch back onto my left needle. Then I turn my work around to the wrong side, and I begin to purl my way back. First knit the 4 stitches of ribbing, and then I purl my way back to the beginning of the row. Now I have my yarn looped around this stitch. That is to avoid making the hole, but I have to not pull on it, because if I do I will create a hole here instead. So let it stay loose, and then I purl and knit and purl and knit. So yeah, that looks quite good. And then I purl the last stitches. And now I'm at the beginning of my row. So I continue to the other side, and I first do the tail, and then the first 4 stitches of the ribbing. And then I do the same thing here. I slip, but I have to do it opposite way, because I want the yarn to go on the purl side of the stitch. So I slip this stitch, I bring my yarn to this side, and then I slip the stitch back like this. And when I turn my work around, you see that the yarn is looped around the stitch here on this side. And then I begin to knit back the ribbing first, and then the tail until, oh, this wasn't too pretty. I just have to fix this later. It's just the yarn that is a bit untidy there, so I have to go back and just stretch the yarn a bit. So I will do this one more time, but this time I will knit only the tail. So I'll knit the knit stitches here. I bring my yarn around this purl stitch, back, and the same here. And I'll get back to you after that with the next. So now I'm finished knitting the tail higher in the back, and I will now knit the back together. So this side and this side will be connected. So I do that by first knitting the first stitch that will be in the center back of the tail, and then I will just turn the whole chicken inside out like this, and then I will organize so that these two needles can be held parallel to each other like this. And now this is my first stitch, and I will begin to knit 2 and 2 stitches together, one from each needle. So I will bring my needle through this stitch here, and then the same stitch on the second needle. I pick up the yarn, I bring it through first one stitch and slip it off, then another stitch, slip it off. And now I have 2 stitches here, and I will cast it off by just taking the first stitch and slipping it over the second. And then again pick up first stitch from the first needle, first stitch from the second needle, pick up the yarn, bring it through, bring it through. And then I take the first stitch and slip it over the second. And I make sure not too tight, because if I do this too tight, it will be really non-elastic, and it will also not look too good. So make sure you have some room in your stitches. So I will continue to do this until I have I think 14 stitches left on my needles. And don't despair if you get 15 stitches, or this is not a big deal. It's an egg warmer chicken, so but approximately 14 stitches left. So now I have 14 stitches left. I will take this one and slip it onto one of these 2 needles for the moment, and I will turn my chicken around so that it has the right side out again. So I do that by sticking my needles through the neck opening like this. I turn the chicken back like this, and I try to bring the needles out here through the neck hole without losing any stitches. That's one okay, and There is the second one. Okay, so now I will begin to make the neck. This was the needle I had on my third. This was the stitch I had on my third needle. And I have to find my yarn because it will now be on the inside here somewhere. There. So I just pull a generous piece through the neck hole. So this is the only downside by doing it like this. You have to pull the yarn through like that. So, but it's really not too big of a problem. And no, I picked up the wrong stitch. I have to pay more attention to what I'm doing. There you go. That was the right stitch. And I will begin to knit ribbing just around and around to make the neck. And I just continue until I have the length that I want. And I will actually use one more needle because just knitting in the round with just 2 needles is not the most comfortable thing to do. There you go. And then I have to find my third needle, or fourth needle actually, because I have 3 with stitches on and a fourth to knit with. So, like this. The only thing I want to show you now is that when I begin my second row of the neck, when I do the first stitch, I will get a big gap here. So, to close the gap, I just try to pick on the yarn here to see that, okay, when I pull this, then I sort of close the gap. So I place it on the needle and I purl it together with the first stitch like this. So this will be a bit tight, but pick up the yarn and bring it through and tighten a bit, and there you can see much better. And don't worry, just poke around a bit until you find a nice piece of yarn to pick up. This is not a fashion garment. Again, it's an egg warmer chicken, so I can't imagine anyone turning it inside out to check for flaws. And if they do, they have bigger problems than you having done this to your chicken. So I'll knit the neck and I'll get back to you with how to finish. Now I've finished the neck and I have cut my yarn. Next step is to take 2 and 2 stitches and knit together like this. I just knit them in a regular manner, 2 and 2. So I just stick my needle through 2 stitches at the same time, so that they become one. And there is my last. So I now have half the amount of stitches on my needles, and for the next row I knit all the stitches again, only now I just pull my yarn through the stitch. So I knit and pull through, and I repeat this on all the remaining stitches. There you go. And then I find the hole here at the top of the head. I bring my yarn through to the wrong side and just gently pull on it to close that hole. Later I'll attach it on the wrong side. And here you have the chicken almost finished. Now it only lacks beak and comb and eyes. So I'll show you. Of course you don't need to use yarn for this. There are tons of different materials and techniques of how you can make a beak and a comb, but I choose to do it like this, and I'll show you just as a suggestion. So I do like this to get one loop here, and I will make, no I don't, I actually, yeah, oh it's getting late, so bear with me. I take the two pieces of yarn together and I make 1, 2, 3 and 4 like this, and I find my scissors and just cut and pull through like this. Then I take one of the yarn ends and I stick my crochet needle through one of the stitches in my chain here, and I just stitch my way back to the head like this. And again, this is not exactly science, so you just be creative and you make the beak of your chicken just the way you want. So this is the one side, and I do the exact same on this side with this piece of yarn, and then I will use a needle to bring the yarn ends through to the wrong side, and I will tie them off there to make the beak come close to the head. For the comb I will use my red yarn, and I will just find some place on the head where I find it suitable to begin. Just bring my red yarn through and secure it like that, and then I make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I stick my needle through the same place again, and then I bring the yarn through, and one more time, Now I've made a small loop here with my chain. I make one more stitch here just to move one step back on the head, and then I make 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 again, and then through the same place where I began this chain, just to get that loop again, and then I move on to my next place on the head. There you can see I have my second piece of comb, and I will continue until I have the comb as big as I want it, and then I will just use the needle to bring these yarn ends as well to the wrong side and tie them off there. And I will also sew eyes onto the head, so that my result will be something like this. And here you can see that the beak gets much closer to the head when it's fastened on the inside, and the same with the comb. And here's the eyes, and I've done it real easy. I've just tied them off like this on the wrong side. So, but this is just a suggestion. You do whatever you want. You can use buttons for eyes, and you can use felt for comb, and really just be creative. So happy Easter!